definitely.
So try to ask the question.
Maybe I will direct them to you, but
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
So, so first I'll talk about the connection.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that I find really interesting about learning about TJC and William James and kind of the broader movement in the 70s and early 80s is thinking about the excitement, and maybe that's romanticizing, and it very surely is romanticizing what was going on, but that there was a definite cause and that there seemed to be this unity and something that isn't really happening now. Maybe in certain issues and in certain places it's happening, but this seemed to be just broad, getting people together. We have to do something. This passion that I think has kind of fallen away from a lot of the younger generations today. So I do think that it would be really wonderful to have been part of that change and to have some sort of a, drawing in the wet cement of history and letting people see that legacy. But at the same time, I think that the pedagogy and the courses that were even being offered at Thomas Jefferson and William James were so completely different from what's happening nowadays at most institutions, and that it does tend to be very much bottom line oriented nowadays in terms of, a lot of the finer arts getting cut for the sake of opening more business classes and economics classes. A lot more geared towards student evaluations and pleasing the students because they're the ones who are giving money, for public institutions to function and, and private, of course, as well. And it's about grades and so much talk about grade inflation and what is the nice dance that you can do so that you're not failing everybody and you're not passing everybody. And it seems to be a level of bureaucracy that wasn't necessarily part of Thomas Jefferson. I'm sure they had different types of bureaucracy, but it was much more about this artistic and intellectual pursuit that hopefully is part of every institution now, but it seemed like it was from a much more creative place. And I think that also fostered a lot more acceptance in terms of individuality and interpersonal connections. Whereas nowadays, to an extent that happens. But I had heard about Grand Valley's legacy, the more immediate legacy, right before I started teaching there. And I only started 3 years ago, so that was fall 2008. And that was right around the time the LGBT Resource Center opened. And that was the same year that right when I started was the same time that domestic partner benefits became part of the deal of being a faculty and staff member. And so after that I said, really, that's very progressive, but that's brand new, really? What was happening before? And so some of the faculty members would tell me what was happening before. Oh no, you couldn't be out because you could be fired. How could they legally do that? Well, it wasn't they were officially firing you, they were getting around it somehow. So I started to learn that a lot of the senior faculty members who are still at Grand Valley are still closeted because I think it's that decades-long fear that you just can't shake in a couple of years. So every December there is I don't know what it's called officially, but every December there is the secret LGBT faculty staff Christmas party or holiday party. So it's kind of like a speakeasy. You just have to know where it is, or you have to know someone who has invited you, or you have to be part of the LGBT Faculty Staff Association, and then you can get a notice that it's happening. But no students are allowed, and as far as I know, no straight individuals are allowed, because I think there's still such fear from a lot of the senior faculty and staff, and that's something that I completely take for granted. I've never worried about my job being an openly bisexual woman. And in fact, I'm fortunate enough that it's an asset in my particular field. Maybe not in some other fields, but for film, it's, being a female and being somewhere in the LGBT community, it's looked at as something to bring diversity into the program. So my heart aches for the decades of pain and shadows they've had to live through. Yeah.
Good answer. Lovely answer.
don't know if there are other parts of that too.
Yeah, no, I think you covered it. I think you covered it very well.
I think so too.
Right.
Thank you. I will say that there is some activism happening now, especially locally is what I'm aware of, not necessarily kind of broader parts of Michigan, but one of my friends, Brooke Murphy, runs kind of an LGBTQ blog website called Speak Equal. And so it's about educating individuals, it's about kind of bringing awareness to certain issues. Sometimes it's about rallying people together for a cause, but it does tend to be pretty small turnout. There's not a lot of publicity happening for it. A few of the activities that we've been involved, or that I've been involved in that Speak Equal was hosting, I think it was 2 years ago, a year or two, I can't remember now, in the summertime, there was a kiss-in, nationwide kiss-in, because several accounts of same-sex couples who were being harassed around the country in public places. So I remember one was in Salt Lake City, and I think one was in Texas. People who were arrested for public displays of affection that were no more intimate than, you know, just a quick peck on the lips or holding hands that any opposite-sex couple would, you know, do in church even. But for same-sex couples in a public place, it was considered to be very taboo, and some of them were even arrested. So this was a display of activity, you know, kind of public coming together to protest this, and in an awareness factor, it was a kiss-in where we marched around downtown Grand Rapids to the, I think it was the courthouse. And we were carrying picket signs, and by the end, you know, people who were partnered would kiss, and the turnout was okay, but it wasn't huge. And I think that that's one of those things that I kind of long for, the passion that the 70s seem to have had. Whereas now I think a lot of people are thinking, well, if it doesn't affect me immediately, I probably don't really need to, you know, break away from my daily life and get involved.
It's interesting because driving here on NPR, an old interview with James Farmer about the integrated bus rides, parallel,
Yes.
incredibly parallel.
Yes, definitely. I think it's with a lot of cases where people just tend to feel apathy if you are kind of skating by and not necessarily fighting for the rights of those who are affected. And I'm always very aware of that too, because I am also very much aware that people say, oh, you look straight. And I'm always so curious to know, and sometimes I'll ask them, what do you mean? What does straight look like? You know, without being completely obnoxious about it, but I want to know, like, what does straight look like? I'm like, oh, you know, you don't look like, and then they'll have miscellaneous stereotypes of what a lesbian looks like or what a bisexual woman looks like, because it's probably just what they've gotten through TV, limited representation in TV and movies. Maybe a few people that they know firsthand, probably lesbians, probably not a lot of bisexual people that are out. So I'm very curious about that, and I've had backlash from both sides, from the straight community as well as lesbian community, where I don't look gay, so they're not going to talk to me. I'm not wearing the uniform, so I'm not engaged. I'm not political enough because I have long hair and I wear makeup. And so I'll go to ladies' night at Rumors and no one will talk to me. And it's a strange thing where it's like, I don't want to fall into the stereotype of what a lesbian or bisexual woman looks like, but is that the only way to be, you know, engaged in some sort of community? So it's a very bizarre cycle that tends to happen nowadays. And even to the point where a lot of people are saying, well, bisexuals don't exist, and it's like we're leprechauns. So I think it's like, okay, I'll be part of this bigger group, even if it doesn't always accept me, because it's you know, tearing down a wall brick by brick. And I think it's also about like being part of this group that doesn't always accept me, allows me to talk to them. And I don't come out right away and say I'm bisexual. I let them make assumptions, whatever they want to assume. And sometimes I might talk about an ex-girlfriend, and so they'll think automatically, you're one or the other, okay, you're lesbian. And I'll oftentimes hear them say negative things about bisexuals. And I'll ask them to tell me a little bit about that. And then I'll finally tell them, well, you know, I'm bisexual. Oh, well, you don't seem that bigot, you know. So I think it's a lot about just kind of, like any kind of breaking through stereotypes, it's just about getting to know a person as a person first, and then the labels can attach themselves later.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Anything you want to say about the films and your experience in, I mean, it seemed to me it was very, you know, male, but we didn't see all of it.
Mhm.
We left right around when the animation started.
Oh, okay.
Animation.
Okay.
It also seemed very white, not
Yes.
a lot of minority representation. And how, just like to hear your impression about working in the program for 3 years and what's going on there.
And yeah, your impression, really, she said, your impression of the students.
Right.
Yeah.
I think working in this particular department, the film video department at Grand Valley, has been, first of all, this beautifully spoiling experience of knowing that the faculty members are so supportive, not just of each other, but of the students. And that's kind of the primary, even if disagreements happen, it's all for the sake of making the program the best. So I'm aware that I'm getting spoiled there, that it may not exist like that everywhere, but hopefully I can take the positivity and bring it with me if that's not existing at miscellaneous departments I might wind up in. But with that aside, there's also very much an awareness of representations from different perspectives of students. And so it does tend to be predominantly Caucasian, male, you know, traditional college age students, primarily straight identified, maybe Christian identified, maybe they don't say one way or the other. And so a lot of the work represents that. A lot of it does feature exclusively or primarily straight, young, male, white characters. And oftentimes if there is a female character, she's relegated to like the girlfriend, sidekick, object, stripper, nag. Any of those are all. And or the mother, or you know, something like that, where it's kind of the tangent, not the primary character. And even some of the few female students that we have who make it into the program kind of in the upper levels will often kind of take the back seat and not direct, but they might do makeup, or they might do costume design, and all of those are hugely important, but they're usually not the primary voice. Sometimes they'll be producers, which is also very important, but again, not telling the story. So I was noticing that with some of the recent work coming about, and something that has been coming up with a lot of the students, either in classes that I've taught, like upper level film studies classes that I've taught, or through the beauty of Facebook and getting to see some of what they're talking about with each other, is this new awareness of feminism. They had never really considered feminism before, at least not on the scale of how it actually seeps into their daily lives. So I remember in the fall semester of 2010, I was teaching American cinema, which is a 300-level film studies course, a special topic studies course. And as always, it's primarily male students. I think I had 3 females out of 30. And toward the end, we were talking about Thelma and Louise, and maybe even a couple of weeks before, you know, I had started to mention this idea. I said something about, oh, well, this character representing an idea of masculinity, whatever that means. And I just kind of moved on. And one of the students had a light bulb moment that he talked to me about later during the Thelma and Louise week, which was, you know, you said that just kind of as an off-the-cuff remark about, well, you know, masculinity, whatever that means. And he said, I'd never considered that before. I'd never considered that it doesn't mean something to everybody. And then I started to think, okay, yeah, a lot of these don't have concrete definitions, or why are we even using these terms anymore? And so that started to get this conversation going about, why do we have to have masculinity or femininity just attributed to one gender or the other? Why can't we have, this range, and why can't we have empowerment, blah, blah, blah. So I was so excited, and I was like, okay, most of you are going to be filmmakers, and so bring that into your work. And having rich characters who aren't always going to be male. And we were talking about the Bechdel test, which is this, not even a test to see if a movie is a feminist movie, but to see, does it have okay representation of females, which is, are there at least 2 female characters in the movie who get names? If so, do they share a scene together and in which they're talking to each other? If so, are they talking about something other than a man? And it's so rare that a film will pass that test. And I had them all, without telling them, I had them all choose a movie and go through the steps. And maybe five of the 30 actually made it through that test. And I think a lot of them were thinking, wow, I'd never thought about that, because they're used to seeing themselves. And so if you're used to seeing yourself, you're not usually aware of what you're not seeing. And so that started to make them think more about other groups that aren't represented, or directors who aren't getting to tell the stories. And so some other students I've seen posting either comments or videos online about how we need more representation, and how these particular tropes are detrimental, and why can't we empower women in this way, and why can't we, and I'm like, oh, I'm so proud of you. And part of that is, yay, being male filmmakers and being aware. And another part is bringing in more diversity of the people who are making the stories. So I don't know what it is about the program that tends to be more male-dominated. And it's like this across the country, but I don't know why females don't gravitate toward it. They gravitate more toward broadcasting. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe it's just this thing that they've never thought about, and so I hope maybe we can do a little bit more outreach to say, like, female students, come on, tell your story. Don't feel like you have to settle, People of color, I've had very few students who are any kind of physical difference, very few who are, in physical disabilities. And I think that those stories are so important to tell. So I've seen more over the years, but it's still pretty slim.
Okay?
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry if I get long-winded.
No, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. One of the reasons